Now, who's the first group of people that you found in chapter 3 that you started researching and reading about? Minoans, yeah. And where did they live? Where at? Where? Crete, off the island of Crete. Okay. What country, what modern day country is that closest to or a part of? Greece, yeah. And what happened to them? It disappeared, yeah. It's hard to tell. History doesn't tell us, and we don't have a lot of information about what happened to their civilization. But what is a characteristic of their civilization? What did you find out about them? What are they known for? Trade. Why do you suppose that was?
Because they were in the ocean.
Yeah, right on the Mediterranean, and they had access to all of the ports. They had access to all the trade routes, and so it would make a whole lot of sense. We're actually going to come back and talk about them a little bit later. Yes? Yes. It's in your resources section. Should be able to find it. So, Abby, would you turn that and close it? And Jameson, we may need to do the same thing back there, just to make that a little easier to see and to read. So we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the Minoans when we get into Greece, because they fit into the early peoples of the Greek culture, even more so than where we're at right now. So I do want you to have a background and information about them. We're going to jump ahead and talk about the Phoenicians. Now, Phoenicians would have also been a seafaring group of people. They would have had access to a lot of trade routes because of their location and who they were. So, hope I turn this on. I'm not sure I'm going to show this entire video.
Mankind's first great age of exploration, leading a fleet of 60 ships. Hammer, king of Carthage. Adventurer, pioneer.
So that clip right there just gives you a little bit of a visual into their way of life as they use those ships to navigate and to provide sustenance. Yes, ma'am? Did you refresh the page? Did you check in the resources?
Yeah, it just has our text in the resources.
Well, that is weird. Can I take a look at lunch and I will get that up? I just checked and it's showing up on mine, so I'm not sure why it's not showing up on yours. But I will get that at lunchtime. I'll get that set up for you guys. So for right now, if you can just take some notes on something else, and then I'll get that set up for you. So we're talking about the Phoenicians here. They are located right along the eastern part of the Mediterranean coast. This map up here shows you some of the extent of their impact as they go throughout the Mediterranean. They also have ports that they begin to set up here in Africa as well as in Spain, along the coast of Italy as well, because of their massive influence. Capital city was the city of Tyre. Not like the stuff you put on your cars. This is spelled differently. Tyre is the capital city here for the Phoenicians. If we were to put this on a map today, present-day Lebanon is a location of the Phoenician Empire, and we're going to talk about some of their characteristics and claims to fame here on our next slide. So these guys were known as merchants. They were perhaps some of the greatest merchants of the early civilizations. Because of all the trading that they did and their advanced technology that they had out on the seas, they were able to transport stuff almost anywhere in the known world. And as they did, they would gather up new things and they would transport it to the other locations. And so this was like the early day of eBay or Amazon. I guarantee you're not getting it in 2-day shipping though. They found a lot of their wealth in natural resources that were around them. While they did do a lot of trading throughout the Mediterranean and with other cultures, they took advantages of the things that were close to home. They researched, or they used those resources, developed them, and they promoted them well. They had a good advertising strategy, and they would take these to people that did not have them. And they would say, here, you need this. They'd ask, what is it? I don't know, but you need it. And we're going to make sure that you pay us a good price for it. One of those resources was the mollusk. Any of you familiar what a mollusk is? Yeah, it's like a sea snail, okay? It is an animal that lives in large bodies of water. And there were a plentiful bounty of these off the coast of the Mediterranean. And the Phoenicians realized that the mollusk also had within it this purple ink substance that they could dye clothing and cotton and materials that very few other people had around the world. And so this became a representation of a rare commodity to have something that was dyed in purple. The Bible talks about that and how purple is signified as the color of what group of people? Royalty. Well, why do you think the royalty had purple? They're rich. They didn't, nobody else could afford it. And so that's where a lot of this came from, was from the Phoenicians and the mollusk and the purple dye that came from it. Well, not only did they have mollusk as one of their natural resources, they also had an abundance of trees. Specifically, cedar and fir were the two main and most populous trees that they had there. And these are the trees that were harvested and were provided to build King Solomon's temple in the Old Testament. If we go back here to 2 Samuel 5:11, unfortunately that didn't show up in front of the trees, but I'll read it for you. In 2 Samuel, the Bible says, "And Hiram, king of Tyre," there's our capital city right there, "sent messengers to David with cedar trees and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a house for David." And then in 1 Kings 5:8-10, this one did show up correctly. So Hiram, king of Tyre, sent word to Solomon, saying, "I have heard the message which you have sent me. I will do what you desire concerning the cedar and cypress timber." So Hiram gave Solomon as much as he desired of the cedar and cypress timber. So here we have a civilization that was very wealthy. They had a lot of these natural resources, and God provided to King Solomon what he wanted him to build the temple out of. And so that's where a lot of these trees came from, and they were given by the king of Tyre. Now, not only were they very famous for their natural resources, they were also claimed to fame here for developing the alphabet. Much of our alphabet can be traced back here to the Phoenicians. How many of you learned phonetics when you were in, or phonics when you were in elementary school? Okay, same concept. Now, their alphabet did not have any vowels in it. So they were like the early form of texting, right? All the abbreviations, right? Yeah, okay. No, but we get a lot of our modern alphabet from the Phoenicians and their development of writing, and they just did not have any vowels in there, all consonants. We also know, as far as their religion goes, that they worshipped the god Baal. Where have you heard Baal before? In the nation of Israel. This is one of the gods that brought down the nation of Israel a couple of times because they were influenced by these other groups of people that worship Baal, and they said, hey, that sounds like a good idea, let's do it too. And so the Phoenicians worshipped this pagan god. In fact, it is traced back here. I'm not ready to go to that one yet. Traced back here to Jezebel. She was the daughter of the king of Sidon. She married Ahab. You guys remember Jezebel and Ahab in the Bible? Okay. Did their story turn out very good? No. So she married Ahab, who was supposed to be the king of Israel. She influenced him. She was part of the Phoenician culture. And there was this intermarriage between a lot of the Phoenician people and the nation of Israel. And when they intermarried, they brought with them their belief in Baal and started to influence the nation of Israel. And that's part of what mixed in Baal worship with the worship of God Jehovah, and of course, that never worked out well. So, the Bible talks about the destruction of the capital city of Phoenicia because of their worship of Baal and because of their pagan ideas or their lack of belief in God. Specifically in Ezekiel chapter 26, where Ezekiel prophesies and he says, "Therefore thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Tyre. I will bring up many nations against you, as the sea brings up its waves." Speaking to the Phoenicians who knew a whole lot about the water. That's where they made their living. And so this prophecy is something that they would understand. They will destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers, and I will scrape her debris from her and make her a bare rock. As a pretty vivid illustration. Vivid prophecy. Can you imagine somebody coming to you and saying that I'm going to destroy everything that you know all the way down to the bare rock, and it's going to be scraped off to the point at which nothing will be left except for this flat rock surface? She will be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for I have spoken, declares the Lord, and she will become spoil for the nations. Now, this prophecy is fulfilled through Alexander the Great. And we've all heard of Alexander the great man who, the great leader, I should say, who led Greece and ended up conquering the world. And it is through his conquest that he comes in and he destroys the Phoenician civilization and totally levels the entire civilization. And those that are not killed through his attacks are taken into captivity, and they become the spoils, they become the slaves and the servants for the Greek people. The other group of people we encounter are the Arameans. Modern-day Syria. And we characterize the Arameans as the melting pot of the Middle East. Because of their position midway between Africa and Asia, there is a constant flow of people traveling through their territory. And as people would travel through this territory, they would often stop by the major cities. They would see what they could find to buy, and oftentimes they would get bogged down in those cities. Many times they'd decide to stay. And so you had different cultures, different languages, different religious beliefs begin to infiltrate into this central location we know today as Syria. Capital city was Damascus. And Damascus becomes a center for international trade. So if you wanted to get something from a different part of the world, your best bet was to go to Damascus. You would meet somebody there, find something there that you've never seen before. So because you had so many different groups of people in one central location, there became this desire and this need to come up with a language or to find a way for them to communicate to one another. And so the Aramaic language is formed, almost a reversal of Babel. I wouldn't say completely, but they merge a lot of different language ideas and concepts together to form the Aramaic language. And it becomes the common language of the entire region because everybody wants to speak that. It's kind of like the old version of English, where today in our world, English is the language that most cultures are trying to learn because that becomes something that most people can understand. I wouldn't say that English is quite to that level as what Aramaic was at that point, because Aramaic was even more widespread than what we might see with English even today. But because there were so many travelers coming through, they wanted to be able to speak the same language, be able to communicate well with one another. Aramaic grew and developed even more than what they ever thought it would. By the time we get to 732 They are destroyed, presumably for their wickedness and lack of recognition of who God is. Yes, ma'am.
How can they be destroyed?
So they were conquered by another group of people. And I don't have in my notes here who that was that came in to conquer them. But they were part of, if I remember correctly, they were part of one of the groups that was destroyed when God allowed, let's see, this would have been Babylon, I believe. And he allowed them to come in 722 BC. They're going to conquer the nation of Israel, and these are going to be part of that group that's going to get conquered in the destruction of Israel as well. When we come back from lunch, we're going to talk about the Hebrew people and how God built them up, and then how God also judged them and other people